The chapel smelled like gardenias and regret. Sloane Merrick stood in front of a gilded mirror in the bride's suite of the Belmont estate, staring at a woman she barely recognized. The dress was Vera Wang. The veil was imported lace. The diamond choker around her throat, a gift from her almost husband, felt like a noose. If you're into stories like this, complicated people, real stakes, and endings you don't see coming, hit subscribe. I've got more where this came from. In 2 hours, she would marry Julian Cade, a man who kissed her like he was closing a business deal and looked at her like she was a line item on a balance sheet. But Julian was safe. Julian was powerful. And after 10 years of clawing her way out of trailer parks and student debt, Sloane had learned that safety and power were the only things that didn't abandon you in the dark. Love was a luxury she'd given up the night she walked away from Kai Winters. The door opened behind her. Sloane didn't turn. She assumed it was her coordinator or maybe one of the bridesmaids she'd hired because Julian insisted a wedding needed them. But then she heard it, a voice that still haunted her dreams, low and rough and impossibly familiar. "You look beautiful," it said, "but you already know that." Her heart stopped. She turned slowly, and there he was, Kai Winters. Billionaire, oil and tech mogul, the man who'd once promised her the world and then let her walk away when she chose her career over him. He stood in the doorway wearing a black suit that probably cost more than her first car, his dark hair slightly too long, his jaw sharper than she remembered. He looked like money and danger and every mistake she'd ever tried to forget. "What are you doing here?" Her voice came out steady, but her hands were shaking. Kai stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "Stopping you from making the worst decision of your life." "You don't get to do this." Sloane's pulse hammered in her throat. "You don't get to show up on my wedding day and—" "Julian doesn't love you." "I know." The admission hung between them like smoke. Kai's eyes, those dark, devastating eyes that had once looked at her like she was the only thing in the world worth wanting, narrowed. "Then why are you marrying him?" "Because you broke me," Sloane wanted to say. "Because I spent 10 years building a career that would make me untouchable, and Julian is the final piece. Because if I can't have love, I'll take power instead." But she didn't say any of that. "Because it's none of your business," she said instead. Kai crossed the room in 3 strides. He stopped close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive that made her remember late nights in his apartment, tangled sheets, whispered promises they were both too young to keep. "I have a proposition," he said. "I'm getting married in 2 hours. Not if you take my offer." Sloane's breath caught. This was insane. This was Kai doing what he always did, walking into her life like a storm and rearranging everything in his path, that she couldn't look away. What offer? Kai reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek black folder. He handed it to her. "Operation Absolute Resolve. It's a joint venture between my company and 6 international investors. We're extracting rare earth minerals from Greenland, elements that will redefine the global stock market, power the next generation of technology, and generate somewhere north of $200 billion over the next decade." Sloane opened the folder. Inside were schematics, satellite images, geological surveys, and financial projections that made her head spin. There were astronomical navigation charts, astronomy data used to position the extraction sites with surgical precision, oil derivatives, mineral compounds that didn't even have common names yet. She looked up at him, "This is revolutionary." "I know, and I want you to run it." The room tilted. "What?" "I'm offering you the CEO position, full operational control, Your name on every contract, every press release, every shareholder meeting. You'll command the entire Greenland operation. You'll have the kind of power Julian could never give you, no matter how many boardrooms he buys his way into. Sloane's heart was racing now. This was everything she'd ever wanted, everything she'd sacrificed for, the kind of opportunity people spent lifetimes chasing. "There's a catch," she said, because there was always a catch with Kai. His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "We have a history, Sloane. We both know what happens when we're in the same room." Heat flooded her face. She hated that he was right. She hated that even now, even after a decade, her body responded to him like a lit match near gasoline. "This is insane," she whispered. "Maybe, but you're standing in a wedding dress about to marry a man you don't love because you think power is the only thing that will protect you. I'm offering you real power, the kind you earned, the kind that's yours." Sloane looked down at the folder again, at the projections, at the satellite images of Greenland's frozen expanse, at the astronomical calculations that would guide the drilling operations through ice sheets 3 kilometers thick, at the future Kai was handing her on a silver platter. She thought about Julian waiting at the altar, about the life she'd planned, controlled, predictable, safe. And then she thought about the night she'd walked away from Kai, when he'd asked her to choose him over her career, and she'd chosen herself instead. She'd spent 10 years telling herself it was the right decision, that love was a trap, that ambition was the only thing worth protecting. But maybe she'd been wrong. Maybe the trap wasn't love. Maybe it was safety. Sloane closed the folder and met Kai's eyes. "1 year," she said. "1 year. And then I'm free." Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe, or hope. "And then you're free." She should have walked away. She should have gone downstairs and married Julian and lived the rest of her life in comfortable, elegant misery. But Sloane Merrick had never been good at doing what she should. She reached behind her neck and unclasped the diamond choker. It fell into her palm, cold and heavy. "Tell Julian I'm sorry," she said, setting it on the vanity. "And tell him I quit." Kai's smile was slow and dangerous and entirely too satisfied. "I'll send him a memo." Sloane walked toward the door, her wedding dress trailing behind her like a ghost. When she reached Kai, she paused. "For the record," she said quietly, "I never stopped thinking about you either." His hand caught hers, fingers interlocking. "Then let's stop wasting time." If there's one thing this story proves, it's that the best decisions are the ones that terrify you. Stick around, because what happens next is going to change everything. 6 months later, Sloane stood in the observation deck of the Polaris Station, a state-of-the-art research facility perched on the edge of Greenland's Scoresby Sound, and watched the midnight sun paint the iceberg gold. She'd been CEO of Operation Absolute Resolve for half a year, and in that time she'd overseen the construction of 3 extraction sites, negotiated contracts with governments on 4 continents, and appeared on the cover of Forbes under the headline, "The Woman Who Owns the Arctic." The operation was a masterpiece of engineering and ambition. Using cutting-edge astronomy software, her team had mapped drilling coordinates with pinpoint accuracy, navigating beneath ancient ice to reach mineral deposits worth trillions. The stock market watched every move. Investors hung on every quarterly report. And Sloane, once a scholarship student who worked 3 jobs to afford textbooks, now commanded a room of billionaires without breaking a sweat. She should have been happy. But happiness, Sloane was learning, was a lot more complicated when Kai Winters was involved. He'd kept his word. He'd given her operational control, let her make decisions without interference, and backed her publicly at every shareholder meeting. But he'd also kept the other part of their deal, proximity. They worked together every day, late nights reviewing stock projections and oil derivatives reports. early mornings walking the extraction sites, their breath fogging in the Arctic air. Dinners in the station's steel and glass dining hall where the only other people were engineers and geologists, too exhausted to care that their bosses had enough unresolved tension to power a small country. And Kai, damn him, was exactly the same as he was 10 years ago. Brilliant, relentless, impossibly confident, except now he was older, sharper, more dangerous. Now he looked at her like he knew exactly what he'd lost and exactly how much he wanted it back. The door behind her opened. "Thought I'd find you here." Sloane didn't turn. She knew his voice too well. "Can't sleep?" Kai stepped beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. He was wearing a dark sweater and jeans, casual for him, and his hair was slightly too long, like he'd been running his hands through it. "Stock's down 3 points," he said. Julian's been feeding negative press to every outlet that'll listen. Sloane's jaw tightened. Julian, of course. Her almost husband had not taken the wedding cancellation well. He'd spent the last 6 months doing everything in his power to sabotage Operation Absolute Resolve, leaking fabricated safety concerns, spreading rumors about cost overruns, convincing investors that Sloane was unqualified and Kai was reckless. He'd even gone so far as to suggest that the astronomy data was flawed, that the oil projections were inflated, that the entire Greenland venture was a house of cards waiting to collapse. "Let me guess," she said. "He's claiming we're damaging the environment. Among other things, he's also implying that you and I are—" Kai trailed off.
"Sleeping together?" He didn't use those words, but yes. Sloane laughed bitterly. "Of course he is. Are we going to talk about it?" Her stomach dropped. About what? About the fact that Julian's not entirely wrong. She finally looked at him. Kai's expression was unreadable, but his eyes, God, his eyes were burning. "We're not sleeping together," Sloane said carefully. "No, but you want to." The air between them crackled. Sloane's pulse was hammering now, heat flooding her face, her chest, every part of her that remembered what it felt like to be close to him. "This is a bad idea," she whispered. "I know. We have a contract, professional boundaries, a year of working together without—" "I know. Then why are you looking at me like that?" Kai stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him, close enough that if she leaned forward just an inch, their mouths would touch. "Because I've spent 10 years trying to get over you," he said quietly, "and every day we're here, I realize I never did." Sloane's breath caught. She should have stepped back, should have reminded him that they were colleagues, that mixing business with personal history was a disaster waiting to happen, that she'd walked away from him once and she could do it again. But she didn't move. "You asked me to choose," she said, her voice shaking. 10 years ago, you asked me to choose between you and my career, and I chose my career. You said if I walked out that door, we were done. So I walked, and you let me. I was an idiot. You were 25. I was in love with you." Kai's hand came up, his fingers brushing her jaw. "I'm still in love with you." The words hit her like a lightning strike. Sloane closed her eyes, because if she looked at him, if she saw the truth in his face, she'd lose every ounce of control she had left. "Kai, I'm not asking you to choose anymore," he said. "I'm telling you that I'll take whatever you're willing to give me. If that's just this year, fine. If it's just working together, I'll live with it. But don't stand here and tell me you don't feel this too." She opened her eyes. And then she kissed him. It was a mistake, a terrible, reckless, inevitable mistake. But the moment their mouths met, The moment his hand slid into her hair and pulled her closer, Sloane stopped caring about mistakes. She stopped caring about contracts and professionalism and all the walls she'd built around herself. Because this was the only thing that had ever felt real. When they finally pulled apart, both of them breathing hard, Kai rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me tonight," he whispered. Sloane nodded, and for the first time in 10 years, she let herself want something more than power. Some stories you watch, some you live. This one's about to get under your skin. Keep listening. The next 3 months were the happiest and most dangerous of Sloane's life. By day, she was the unstoppable CEO who'd turned Operation Absolute Resolve into the most talked about venture in the global stock market. Her team had completed the 4th extraction site, pulling rare earth elements from beneath Greenland's ice with an efficiency that made competitors weep. The astronomy team she'd assembled, astrophysicists and geologists working in tandem, had refined their celestial positioning system so precisely that they could drill within centimeters of target coordinates. Oil derivatives tied to the operation were climbing, stock prices were surging, and every financial analyst from New York to Singapore was calling Operation Absolute Resolve the investment opportunity of the decade. By night, she was the woman who fell asleep in Kai's arms and woke up to the sound of his heartbeat. They kept it quiet, no public displays, no announcements, just stolen hours in his quarters, whispered conversations in the dark, and the kind of intimacy Sloane had convinced herself she didn't need. They talked about everything: her childhood in the trailer parks of West Virginia, his years building his company from a single stock market bet that could have destroyed him. They talked about the night she'd walked away, about the decade they'd lost, about whether it was possible to build something real when the foundation was this complicated. "Do you regret it?" Kai asked one night, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. Sloane was quiet for a moment. "I regret that it took me 10 years to realize what I wanted, but no, I don't regret choosing you. You didn't choose me. You chose yourself." She turned to look at him. Maybe those are the same thing now. Kai smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made her believe they might actually survive this. But Julian was watching. He'd always been watching. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a leaked email. Sloane was in her office reviewing the latest extraction reports when her assistant knocked on the door, her face pale. "Miss Merrick, you need to see this." She handed her a tablet. On the screen was an article from Business Insider. "Operation Absolute Resolve in Turmoil. CEO's secret relationship with investor raises ethics concerns." Sloane's blood ran cold. The article included photos, grainy, long-lens shots of her and Kai on the observation deck, walking the ice fields, entering his quarters late at night. There were quotes from anonymous sources claiming that Sloane's decisions were compromised, that she was prioritizing her relationship over the operation's integrity, and that investors deserved transparency. And at the bottom of the article, a statement from Julian Cade himself. "While I wish Miss Merrick well personally, the investors and stakeholders of Operation Absolute Resolve deserve leadership that is above reproach. I'm calling for an independent review of the operations management structure to ensure that all decisions have been made in the best interest of the project, not personal entanglements." Where did this come from? Sloane's voice was deadly calm. Anonymous source, but the timing, her assistant hesitated. Julian Cade just released a statement calling for an independent review of the operations leadership structure. Of course he did. Sloane set the tablet down and stood. She felt like she was moving through water, every step heavy and sluggish.
This was exactly what Julian wanted, not just to destroy the operation, but to destroy her. He knew exactly where to strike, exactly how to make her look reckless and unprofessional and unworthy of the power she'd fought so hard to claim. And the worst part, she'd handed him the ammunition. By now, you're probably wondering how this ends. Here's the truth. So are they. And what happens next will decide everything.
The board meeting was scheduled for the following week. Sloane spent the days leading up to it preparing her defense, reviewing contracts, gathering evidence of the operation's success. She compiled reports on the astronomy program's accuracy, the oil derivative projections, the environmental impact assessments. She built spreadsheets showing that under her leadership, Operation Absolute Resolve had exceeded every benchmark, every deadline, every financial projection. But every time she looked at the numbers, every time she saw the progress they'd made, all she could think about was Kai. She'd been so sure that keeping things professional was the only way to survive. But somewhere along the way, she'd stopped just working with him. She'd fallen for him all over again. And now it was going to cost her everything. The night before the meeting, Kai found her in her office. She was sitting at her desk, staring at a blank screen, her mind spinning. "You should be resting," he said. "Can't sleep." He walked over and sat on the edge of her desk. "We're gonna win this." "You don't know that." "I do, because I'm going to tell them the truth." Sloane looked up sharply. "What truth?" "That I'm in love with you, that I have been for 10 years, and that if they want to remove someone from leadership, it should be me, not you." Her heart stopped. "Kai, no, you can't." "I can and I will." His voice was steady, certain. "You've worked too hard for this. You've sacrificed too much. I'm not going to let Julian or anyone else take it away from you. You'll lose everything. I don't care." Sloane stood, her hands shaking. "I care. I care because you built this company from nothing, because you took a single stock market bet and turned it into an empire, because you're the reason this operation exists in the first place, and I'm not going to let you throw it away from me. Then what do you want me to do?" "I want you to let me fight my own battles." Kai's jaw tightened. "I can't do that." "Yes, you can, because that's what you should have done 10 years ago." The words hung between them like broken glass. "You're right," Kai said quietly. "I should have fought for you. I should have told you choosing your career didn't mean giving me up, that we could have had both. But I was 25 and stupid and too proud to admit I was scared." "Scared of what?" "Of losing you." His eyes met hers, raw and unguarded. "And I lost you anyway." Sloane's throat tightened. She wanted to be angry, wanted to hold on to the hurt and resentment she'd carried for a decade. But looking at him now, at the man who'd walked into a chapel and offered her the world, who'd spent 6 months working beside her without asking for anything, who was willing to sacrifice everything just to protect her, she couldn't. "I walked away because I thought love was a trap. I thought if I let myself need you, I'd lose myself. But I was wrong. I didn't lose myself when I loved you, Kai. I lost myself when I stopped." His hand came up, cupping her face. "Then don't stop." "I'm terrified." "So am I." She kissed him, slow and desperate and full of every unspoken thing they'd been carrying for 10 years. And when they pulled apart, Sloane knew exactly what she had to do. "I'm going into that boardroom tomorrow, and I'm going to tell them the truth, all of it. And if they decide to remove me, then that's their choice. But I'm not going to let you fall on a sword for me. Not again." Kai's thumb brushed across her cheek. "Then we do it together. Together. No more running. No more running." The boardroom was polished mahogany and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the frozen sound.
Sloane stood at the head of the table, 12 investors staring at her with varying degrees of skepticism. Julian sat at the far end, his expression smug. Kai stood beside her, solid and steady. Miss Merrick, the lead investor, a silver-haired woman named Dr. Holloway, began, "We've called this meeting to address concerns about Operation Absolute Resolve's leadership structure, specifically the ethics of your relationship with Mr. Winters." "I understand," Sloane said evenly. "Do you deny the allegations?" "No." A murmur rippled through the room. Julian's smile widened. "I don't deny them," Sloane continued, "because they're true. Kai Winters and I are in a relationship. We have been for several months. And yes, he is technically my supervisor under the operational contract." Dr. Holloway's expression hardened. "Then you understand that this represents a serious conflict of interest." "I do, which is why I'm proposing a restructure." The room went silent. Sloane pulled out a sleek folder and slid it across the table. "This is a revised operational agreement. Under this structure, Kai Winters remains the primary investor and majority shareholder, but I answer directly to the board, not to him. All major decisions go through an independent oversight committee. Full transparency, full accountability." Dr. Holloway opened the folder, scanning the documents. "Furthermore," Sloane said, "I'm proposing that we bring in an external auditor to review every decision I've made since I took the CEO position, every contract, every expenditure, every operational choice. If you find any evidence that my relationship with Kai compromised the operation's integrity, I'll resign immediately." Julian leaned forward. "This is a desperate attempt to save face." "No," Sloane said sharply. "This is accountability, something you know nothing about, Julian." His eyes narrowed. Sloane turned back to the board. "In the 6 months I've been CEO, Operation Absolute Resolve has exceeded every projection. We're ahead of schedule, under budget, and our environmental impact is 30% lower than industry standard. The stock has increased 42%. We've created 800 jobs, and we positioned this operation to redefine the global rare earth market for the next decade." She pulled up a presentation on the screen behind her. Charts, graphs, satellite images showing the precision of our astronomy-guided drilling operations. Financial projections that made even the skeptical investors lean forward. "Our astronomy program," Sloane continued, "has achieved a positioning accuracy of 99.7%. We're extracting minerals that will power everything from electric vehicles to advanced telecommunications, and we're doing it with a smaller carbon footprint than any comparable operation in history." She paused, letting the numbers sink in. "You can remove me if you want. You can let Julian Cade's smear campaign win. Or you can recognize that my relationship with Kai Winters has nothing to do with my ability to lead this operation. And if you can't separate the personal from the professional, then maybe you're not the investors this project deserves." The room was dead silent. Dr. Holloway looked at the rest of the board. Then she looked at Sloane. "We'll review your proposal and the audit findings," she said slowly. "But, Miss Merrick, if we move forward with this restructure, there can be no further ethical lapses. Is that understood?" "Completely." "Then this meeting is adjourned." Sloane's knees nearly buckled with relief, but she kept her expression calm, professional, as the investors filed out. Julian was the last to leave, and as he passed her, he leaned in close. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "Yes," Sloane said, "it is." When the door closed behind him, Kai's hand found hers. That was incredible. That was terrifying. "You didn't show it." Sloane exhaled slowly. "I'm still not sure we won. We will." Right now, Sloane and Kai are waiting to see if the truth was enough. But here's what they've already learned. Sometimes the biggest risk is the one worth taking. Stay with us. The audit took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of investigators combing through every email, every contract, every decision Sloane had made. 3 weeks of interviews with engineers, geologists, and contractors. 3 weeks of financial analysts reviewing stock movements, oil derivative reports, and expenditure records. 3 weeks of waiting, wondering if she'd done enough. Kai stayed close, not interfering, not trying to fix things, just there, steady, solid, exactly what she needed. They didn't hide anymore. They dinnered together in the common areas, walked the observation deck hand in hand, worked side by side in the control room, occasionally catching each other's eyes and sharing small, private smiles. The rest of the team noticed, of course, but instead of judgment, Sloane saw something else in their faces. Respect, because she stood in front of the board and owned her choices, because she demanded accountability and transparency, because she refused to let anyone, including herself, compromise the integrity of the operation.
And when the auditor's report finally came back, it was a single sentence that changed everything. No evidence of ethical misconduct or compromised decision-making. Miss Merrick's leadership is exemplary. Sloane read it 3 times before she believed it. They called another board meeting. Dr. Holloway stood at the head of the table, the audit report in front of her. "The board has voted," she said. "Sloane Merrick will remain CEO of Operation Absolute Resolve under the revised oversight structure, effective immediately." Sloane exhaled. She'd won. Not because she'd played it safe, not because she'd chosen power over love, but because she'd finally learned that she didn't have to choose at all. Dr. Holloway continued. "Additionally, we'd like to commend both Miss Merrick and Mr. Winters for their transparency and professionalism throughout this process. Operation Absolute Resolve is not just a successful venture, it's a model for how complex projects should be managed." One of the other investors spoke up. "I'll admit, I had my doubts, but the numbers don't lie. This operation is positioned to change the industry, and Miss Merrick, your leadership is a significant part of that success." Sloane felt Kai's hand squeeze hers under the table. "Thank you," she said. "I won't let you down." "We know," Dr. Holloway said with a small smile. "Now get back to work. We have an empire to build." That night, Sloane and Kai stood on the observation deck, watching the Aurora Borealis paint the sky in ribbons of green and gold. The temperature had dropped to -20, but Sloane barely felt it. She was wrapped in Kai's arms, her back against his chest, his chin resting on top of her head. "You did it," Kai said quietly. "We did it." He smiled. "I'm proud of you. I'm proud of us." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the lights dance across the Arctic sky. Somewhere below them, the extraction sites hummed with activity, drilling operations that would continue around the clock, a team of engineers and scientists working together to pull the future out of ancient ice. "Do you ever think about what would have happened," Kai asked, "if I hadn't walked into that chapel?" "Every day I think about it. I think about how close I came to settling, to choosing a life that looked successful but felt empty. I think about it too, about how close I came to losing you again." Sloane turned in his arms to face him. "You're not gonna lose me. Not this time. Promise?" "Promise." Kai's hands came up to frame her face. "So what now?" "Now?" Sloane leaned into him, her forehead resting against his. "Now we build an empire. Together. No second guessing. No second guessing. No running away when things get hard. No running." She kissed him, slow and certain. "I'm done running." Kai pulled her closer, and for the first time in 10 years, Sloane felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be.
Not because she'd sacrificed love for power, and not because she'd sacrificed power for love, but because she'd finally realized she deserved both, and she was never letting go again. The northern lights continued their dance above them, nature's reminder that some things are worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth building an entire empire for. "You know what the best part is?" Sloane said softly. "What?" "We get to do this for the rest of our lives. Wake up every day and choose each other. Choose the work. Choose the challenge. Choose everything." Kai's smile was genuine and unguarded. "That sounds like a pretty good empire to me." The best one. They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other and the impossible beauty of the Arctic night. Below them, Operation Absolute Resolve continued its work, extracting the future from beneath ancient ice, turning ambition and precision into something that would change the world. But up here on this observation deck, with the Aurora Borealis painting the sky and Kai's arms around her, Sloane realized something important. She'd spent 10 years believing that power was the only thing worth protecting, that love was a liability, that success meant building walls so high that nothing could hurt her. But she'd been wrong. Real power wasn't about walls. It was about bridges, about finding someone who made you stronger, not weaker, about building something together that neither of you could build alone. And real success was standing in the Arctic cold with the man she loved, knowing that tomorrow they'd wake up and do the impossible together. "Hey," Kai said, breaking the comfortable silence, "what are you thinking about?" Sloane smiled. "I'm thinking that walking away from that wedding was the best decision I ever made. Better than taking the CEO position? Better than everything, because it led me here, to you, to us, to this." Kai kissed her forehead. "So Julian is not going to stop, right? He's going to keep trying to undermine us." "Let him try. We've got the board support, a successful operation, and the truth on our side. He can't touch us." "You sound confident." "I am confident because I learned something important these last few months." "What's that?" "That the things worth having are the things worth fighting for, and I'm done being afraid of what I might lose. I'd rather focus on what I have." "And what do you have?" Sloane turned in his arms again, meeting his eyes. "Everything." The word hung in the air between them, simple and true and perfect. Somewhere in the distance, an alert chimed from the control room, probably a status update from one of the drilling sites, a reminder that the work never really stopped, that running $1 billion operation meant constant vigilance, constant adaptation, constant problem solving. But for this moment, Sloane let it wait. Because some things are more important than spreadsheets and stock reports and quarterly projections. Some things like this, like them, like the empire they were building together, deserved to be savored. "Come on," Kai said, taking her hand. "Let's go inside before we freeze." "Wait a minute, I want to remember this." "Remember what?" "This feeling, this moment, the night we stopped fighting what we wanted and started building it instead." Kai pulled her closer one more time, and they stood there beneath the aurora, two people who'd spent a decade running from each other, finally learning how to stand still. And in that stillness, they found everything they'd been searching for. 3 months later, Sloane was standing in front of a packed auditorium at the International Energy Summit in Oslo. The presentation had gone perfectly. She'd shown the results from Operation Absolute Resolve, the efficiency, the environmental data, the financial projections. She talked about the astronomy program that made it all possible, about the team of engineers and scientists who turned an impossible dream into reality. And when she finished, the room erupted in applause. Backstage, Kai was waiting. "You were incredible," he said, pulling her into his arms. "I was half the person I am in this room. We were incredible. This is our success, not just mine." "Always weave now?" Sloane smiled. "Always." Her phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Holloway. "Board meeting next week. We'd like to discuss expansion opportunities. Bring your best ideas." Sloane showed Kai the message. "More expansion?" he said. "We're already running 4 sites." "What can I say? I'm ambitious." "That's what I love about you." "Just that?" Kai's eyes gleamed. "Among other things." They walked out of the auditorium together, hand in hand, ready for whatever came next. More challenges, more opportunities, more late nights and impossible problems and moments of pure, unexpected joy. Because that's what the thing about building an empire with someone you love. It's never easy, but it's always worth it. If you made it all the way to the end of this story, thank you for being here. Sloane and Kai's journey reminds us that the best things in life are the ones we're brave enough to fight for, and that sometimes the greatest empire you can build is the one you create with someone who makes you believe anything is possible. Drop a comment and let us know what you thought, because there are more stories like this coming, and we can't wait to share them with you.